we are live and it is 6:30, 6:31 on the dot. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Ziller. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Northwest Indiana Regional Development Authority. It is my privilege to welcome you to a virtual public meeting. We are here to review and discuss the transit development process surrounding the Main Street station in Munster Dyer to be built on the new Westlake Corridor commuter train line. I am joined by Dustin Anderson, Town Manager of Munster, and Tom DiGilio, Town Manager of Dyer, and by members of the RDA planning team to discuss the specifics of the potential development around the Munster Dyer Main Street station. So before I turn the virtual microphone over to Dustin and Tom, let me begin by setting the stage. For this process. The RDA was given the task as part of its enabling legislation to assist in developing and furthering commuter rail in Northwest Indiana as part of a strategy to increase connectivity with Chicago and to grow the economy of our region here in Northwest Indiana. The state provided funding, and in the 2015 and then again in the 2017 legislative sessions, made it very clear that the RDA was to take the lead in financing the rail expansion. So further in 2017, the state tasked the RDA with assisting the municipalities in which the stations were situated and did provide the funding mechanisms to help in planning for and financing their TDD. So if we can go to the slide for the planning entities. Should be slide 2. So during the past 2 years, the RDA has been meeting with our station area community leaders to understand their own visions and planning concepts for TOD. The RDA has pulled together a planning team to assist in these efforts, consisting of MKSK, who you will be hearing from a lot tonight, KPMG, and Policy Analytics, and we will all be available afterwards during the Q&A portion of tonight's program. The virtual meeting tonight is the next step in the process of bringing a unique set of what we call development tools into play to help grow the Northwest Indiana economy and to further establish a high quality of life for our region. And just as a matter of an update for the Westlake Corridor commuter train line that I'm sure many of you are aware of, but on October 28th, the Federal Transit Administration signed the grant providing the funding to make the Westlake Corridor project a reality. So the Northwest Indiana Commuter Transportation District, NICTD rail operator, they're already working with its design and construction teams to begin the 4+ years of work to make the Westlake line operational. But I guess I would say that tonight, with the RDA in convening this meeting, we are moving on our own, moving forward on our own separate mission, which is really to ensure that the best options for development around the station areas are considered, agreed to by the communities, and eventually funded and put into place. So the role of the RDA, which I believe we have a slide for, so you can see what's on the screen, but really the role of the RDA is to help communities create more attractive, secure neighborhoods. And as we navigate through this process, we really are enabling our communities to compete for the young professionals that will work in Chicago and to make our communities more attractive for businesses and people who will work in Indiana. And the RDA wants to work with you to strengthen your community, to help enhance what it is you love about it, and to enhance your livability. So whatever your interest is, whether you're a resident, a developer, a business owner, stewards of your community, we are grateful for your willingness to participate in the conversation tonight, and we look forward to making this a very successful development process. So with that, I will hand it over to Dustin Anderson and Tom DiGilio, Munster and Dyer Town Managers, to say a few words about the TDDs in the Munster Dyer Main Street station. But again, I do want to thank you all for your time and participation tonight. So Mr. Anderson, why don't I hand it over to you first?
Thank you, Ms. Sillis. I just wanted to say thank you to the RDA and their team at MKSK and KPMG. Throughout the process so far, the town has had the opportunity to work with these folks, and I feel personally that our comments have been heard and incorporated throughout that process so far. And I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about tonight. A TDD is not a change in zoning. It's not eminent domain for economic development. No one's going to take anything from anybody. Nor is it a partnership with an individual developer or developers, right? What it is a way for the town to have a say in how an area around the station might develop in the future and share in the benefit of that potential development. So, for example, the funds generated in a particular district can only be used within that district. There's no money that leaves Munster and is spread around and goes to other places. If it happens in this particular district that we're going to see tonight, whatever those boundaries may be, it can only be reinvested in that district. So if there are improvements that need to be made to the streets or infrastructure or enhancements for the general public, the town will have an additional tool in our toolbox to meet those needs for our residents and businesses. Now, tonight we have the opportunity to hear more feedback about this process from you, the public. Based on our experiences to date, I have every confidence that your participation will be seriously considered and incorporated in the final version of what this is. This is an iterative process, and it's stronger for your involvement, and it's going to be better for your participation and feedback. So thank you for making the time to participate tonight. If you're watching this on recording or later in the week, thank you for going out of your way and finding this and sitting down and taking the time to be involved. We're better for it, and the product will be better for it. So thank you very much. Mr. DiGiulio, I'll pass the baton to you.
Unmute, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dustin. I won't repeat all the things Dustin was talking about. It was a good primer on what we're doing tonight. I will say that the town council and its plan commission are finishing up a comprehensive plan review. And as part of that review, we have met with the RDA on a number of occasions, and they've incorporated all of our concepts for the Sheffield Avenue and the north end of town into the TDD. And we're very, very helpful, very grateful for that. So we appreciate everybody that has signed on. Many of you have been coming to the steering committee meetings on the comp plan and the other TOD meetings that we have had over the last couple of years. So I'm looking forward to listening to your feedback and listening to the presentation. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I will take over. My name is Eric Lucas, and I'm with MKSK. We are the urban planning firm that's assisting the RDA in working with the various communities along both the West Lake and the South Shore double track lines to define these transit development districts. And what I'd like to start with initially here is kind of an overview of the process and an overview of what the project is. And Tom and Sherry and Dustin just gave a great introduction to how we've been working together over the last year or so. But just to back up for a moment, you're all aware of this, but the train extension and the new line being created is significant. And I think we've got a pop-up window there. Thank you. It's significant in terms of its connectivity to the Chicago area and what it means in terms of private investment, public investment in the area, and the new jobs that it will create in Northwest Indiana to really put the region on a real growth trajectory. Next slide. And as you all know, we're specifically talking today about the Munster Dyer Main Street station, which is along the West Lake Corridor line, which is a 9-mile line. And you can see here some of the figures about the number of dollars invested into this new piece of infrastructure. And Sherry did a great job of explaining kind of where we are in the process. And as you all know, the groundbreaking has occurred for the train line recently. And so it's a real milestone into the process. Next slide, please. And of course, the other component of this project is the 16 miles of the new second track and the 25 miles of the double track line in general that hugs the South Shore and weaves its way through numerous communities. And you can see some of the figures there of the investment that's being created through this train line extension. New slide, please. And here you see both of those lines together and the overall impact here for the region, which is, again, quite significant, not only in terms of how it connects to Chicago, but the opportunities it creates for each community along the way. Next slide. As we begin to think about transit development districts and the opportunity for new community growth, obviously we've spent a lot of time with the various government entities and the leadership in the different communities to understand how they would like to grow. And that's important because we know that each community will grow in a manner that's consistent with their own goals and aspirations. And so we wanted to take a moment just to show you how similar improvements in infrastructure across the Illinois state line have affected and impacted communities in very different ways. And you can sort of see, I'm not going to go through all of the data on the right-hand side of the screen, but you can see based upon where these stations are, how the development has occurred differently. And that's really important because certain communities are going to grow at different rates. Certainly the amount of time that has sort of expired between the time that the stations have been open and now will affect that amount of growth as well. But it's really important for us to understand how your communities would like to grow so that we can begin to think through the right areas to target for these transit development districts. Next slide, please. And so as we get underway this evening, our goal here is to give you a lot of information in a short amount of time. We are going to spend about 45 minutes covering the overall presentation and the various ideas that we want to put forward for your feedback. And then we'll be able to take questions at the end of the presentation. We'll talk about how to submit those questions. But as we work through the presentation portion of tonight, we want to basically cover four topics here. We want to give a kind of a primer on what transit development districts are and what the boundary that we're creating really means. We'll talk a little bit about how we've gone about creating these draft boundaries thus far, and the draft boundary specifically for the Main Street station. And then as we move into the specifics of this boundary, we'll start by talking through the community goals that we've understood and how those have served as the underpinning to our work. And then lastly, we'll walk you through a series of diagrams that explain what the boundary, the draft boundary that we have tonight is and how that's been arrived at. So with that, next slide, please. We do have, in addition to the on-screen slides, we have a number of different ways for you to sort of learn and participate tonight. You've seen a couple of live polls thus far pop up on your screens, and with those live polls, you can answer targeted questions that we have for you throughout the presentation. You'll also be able to submit questions throughout this presentation in the Q&A box, and once those are submitted, we'll collect those, and then we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Our hope is that we'll be kind of through all of that by 7:15 or 7:15 p.m. And then lastly, after this evening, there's quite a bit of content that we've generated and placed onto the project website. The project website is www.nwitdd.com. We encourage you to visit. You'll also, on that website, be able to see a video recording of tonight's meeting. So if you missed something, you had to step out, you weren't able to finish the meeting for some reason, you can go back and watch the video of tonight. And you'll also be able to see all of the Q&A that's been submitted. We'll also point out that you can visit the two town halls and visualize these materials on boards in a gallery fashion, where you can also participate in online polls, and have the ability to contact us. So multiple ways for you to provide input. As Dustin mentioned, we really value that, and we encourage you to let us know your thoughts. Next slide, please. So as we get underway, we want to start with what you should know about the TDD boundaries themselves. Next slide. And as Dustin laid out very well, this is really a tool for the communities. Transit development districts are put together. They're boundaries that help to promote the kind of growth that the communities would like to see centered around this new transit infrastructure. And within this boundary, we'll be able to use a new economic tool to help support infrastructure investment beyond the train lines. And really, this is, again, to help put the communities onto a path of growth that fits their visions. And I guess this slide says that again, but it really is to complement how you've already conceived of your community and give you a new economic tool to help implement those ideas. So as Dustin also mentioned, we always like to point out what this effort is and what this effort is not. So we'll talk through quite extensively this notion of a boundary. In general, it's about a 320-acre area, and it's really to promote new economic development in these communities along the train lines. And we've gone through quite a bit of analysis to arrive at what we have as a draft. Now, what we're not doing is we're not changing zoning. We're not changing land use. We're not changing property ownership here. This isn't an effort of eminent domain. We're not working directly with developers on this aspect of the project. And we're also not planning the train lines themselves. That is an important item to really emphasize. The train lines that are now under construction, those are NICTD-led projects. This is a different process. We're working to really create this boundary around those stations. So with that, next slide, we'll be able to let you know that these boundaries, we have a couple of statutory sort of requirements that we have to sort of keep in mind as we draft these boundaries. And the first of which is that these have to be contiguous areas. They can't be disconnected. The boundary has to be one contiguous area that can not exceed 320 acres in size. And now that boundary can take on quite a unique shape, and you'll see that in the draft boundary we have to share this evening. The boundary does not have to be sort of a regular circle or a square or a rectangle. It wants to follow the strategic sort of areas that really promote the kind of economic development goals that you would like to see in a community. So you'll see the boundary lines are quite unique. And within this boundary, the unique aspect of this is the economic tools that will be available to the RDA and to the community to promote the kind of growth that you would like to see. And so within the district, we will be able to capture new incremental tax growth and local income tax as well, incremental income tax growth within the boundaries, and be able to take those revenues and reinvest those revenues into infrastructure around the station areas. It's really important to note that this is not a new tax. It's not a new levy. This is incremental growth that will occur over time, much in the same way that incremental growth occurs in local income and property tax today. So we'll be able to collect that increment and reinvest it. And as Dustin really accurately pointed out, the revenue that is collected in each district uniquely is reinvested in the same unique district. It's not taken away and put into different districts or communities. So that's really important. It's also really important to reemphasize that a local community will always retain land use and zoning control here. So this is really an economic development tool. It's not a regulatory change. Next slide, please. For those of you who may be familiar with the concept of tax increment financing districts, what we're talking about tonight is different than a tax increment financing or a TIF district. And in some cases where we are drafting a TDD boundary, that TDD boundary may actually overlay against an existing TIF district. that has already been formed in communities. And in those cases, the RDA and the communities will agree to how those revenues are split between local TIF obligations, which will always be met, and which could be reinvested through the TDD investment infrastructure incremental growth. Next slide, please. And as one step in the process, as Dustin mentioned, and Tom as well, we have been working with communities for the last year plus to really begin to understand what's important at each station area. And now, as we're here at this step in the process where we're sharing out information to the public, to residents and business owners and others who are attending, that'll allow us to then move into a different phase of the project where we'll hold 2 public hearings, and the RDA board will approve the boundaries. And once the boundaries are approved, then they will move towards final approval at the state budget committee. So we're at sort of this stage now where we're engaging with the public in these sessions to allow us to move forward with public hearings with the RDA board. Next slide, please. So now that you've heard a little bit about what a boundary is and the reason for a boundary and what it's not, and sort of the tool that it'll become for communities, I want to talk a little bit about how we've arrived at the boundary that we're going to present to you here shortly. So we've had 3 steps that we've conducted thus far. We'll have one more step to go through, but the first step that we took, seems like quite a while ago now, was really becoming quite familiar with the station area. We did a lot of on-the-ground research. We met with the community leaders. We prepared a lot of background information and mapping and data that began to sort of feed into our analysis. Our second step of the process is really a lot of collaboration with community leaders, listening, learning, vetting different thoughts, and really beginning to create what we at that point were calling study areas. We weren't quite at a point where we were calling them a draft boundary, but those work sessions were very helpful for us to really gain insight in terms of how communities would like to grow and the goals that each community has. That allowed us to then, through those series of sessions, create a draft boundary. And that draft boundary took into account quite a bit of data with respect to land use and existing studies. Market forces, of course, are important. Infrastructure needs that could be necessary. And that allowed us to create the draft boundary that we're going to present out to you this evening. And that draft boundary, once we present out, get feedback, we'll be able to make those revisions that are necessary to refine the boundary, and then to get that in front of the RDA board for those public hearings that I just mentioned. So we're at stage 3 of 4, and soon after this evening, we'll be jumping into stage 4 of our process. Next slide, please. And so as we begin to think through how to create the actual shape of this boundary, we take into account sort of 3 big buckets of information. We've got quantitative information, which is really things that we can analyze and map and really begin to sort of calculate, the adequacy of things and where we'd like to see different types of existing features to be enhanced or promoted, or where there might be great opportunities for redevelopment. And we also look at the qualitative aspects. This is really where we want to understand your goals as a community, and we want to dive deep into the plans that you've already put together, or that you're, as Tom mentioned, that you're currently finishing up. And we want to be able to piggyback onto those plans and support those plans. And then we actually look specifically at areas, at sites, to become more aware of some of the obstacles or challenges to including some areas within the boundary. And so all of those aspects, as you move to the next slide, allow us to take a deeper dive into those actual sort of sites that begin to give us the intelligence that we need to draw these boundaries, we began to look more thoroughly at walkability, at existing conditions, at future land use that you all are planning, at ownership. Particularly, we want to understand where there's good public land ownership that could be catalytic to new infrastructure or new development. If there are underutilized sites, vacant sites, abandoned sites, those are things that we really start to look at really closely to be able to adjust that boundary line and create something that's going to be quite dynamic. Next slide, please. And then once we sort of have this boundary drafted out, we consider all of the economic development possibilities within that boundary. And some of those things are more readily realistic. Some of those things are more easy to understand. But really, we think of the whole spectrum of opportunity within the boundaries. Sometimes we have great buildings that are good candidates for adaptive reuse or great sites that could be put back into productive use. Other times we know that there are strong assets, good quality neighborhoods, good quality business districts that we want to preserve and enhance. And other times we're wanting to strengthen and revitalize certain areas that are doing well but could be strengthened. Other times there are missing teeth, as we like to call it, in the sort of the overall complexion of a town or an area, where we might target what we call infill development, strategic new development that happens on really discrete sites. And then other times there might be large areas of abandoned properties, vacant properties, underutilized properties that would be very good candidates for redevelopment. So we take into account all of these different types of economic development possibilities within the boundaries. So in other words, where we draw the boundary, we don't assume that everything within there will be redeveloped. We understand that there are lots of things that could qualify for different kinds of activities, and these are the sort of the spectrum of activities that we would expect to see. Next slide, please. And so as we sort of round out our process, we really, as I mentioned, took a lot of time to get to know the communities. And I think that's where we want to sort of emphasize this evening what we've learned thus far about Munster and Dyer, your goals, the things that really make you unique, the things that we want to preserve and enhance. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Aaron Kowalski, who's going to kind of walk you through that work as well as the draft boundary itself. Aaron?
Thanks, Eric. So, you know, as Eric mentioned, we've spent a lot of time in the community. We've had numerous meetings with leadership from both Munster and Dyer. We've toured the community and we've studied the previous plans in great depth. So we've really focused on learning as much as we can about the communities, but really our approach is rooted in each community's economic development goals. So as we look at the town of Munster specifically, and these are goals that came from the town themselves, you know, promoting sustainable growth, supporting transit, creating a legacy of parks, open spaces, and trails, and supporting them as areas are developed, strengthening infrastructure in the community, and looking at where some areas could be redeveloped strategically as more walkable centers. Next slide. You know, emphasizing the importance of trails, parks, you know, and we've looked at kind of those networks and potentially those could be a good way for folks to get from neighborhoods to the train station. So really understanding what's planned, what's built, and what could be, and then what could connect not only to the station, but to Dyer, as that is a focus of that town as well, is an important aspect that we've learned. We've also been fortunate with both communities that they've done a fair amount of recent planning. We've been able to lean on that recent planning. And this is an image of the zoning in and around the station area. You can see kind of the red area to the left where Sherry's pointer is. That's the station area itself. And really we've done a deep dive on what is allowed by current zoning and what opportunities exist based on zoning and future land use designations in the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. As we look at the town of Dyer, similarly, there's really good economic development goals, strengthening the community as kind of a hometown in Lake County, creating a walkable core that this station could connect to over time down Sheffield, capturing the economic development potential of the new train station on Main Street and the areas that are ripe for redevelopment around that and could see a good amount of investment in the future. Looking at multimodal infrastructure, trails, as well as side paths, and kind of getting people from the neighborhoods to the station, as well as promoting better walkability within the community. And then, maximizing investments throughout the community to build that community that they really want to see. Next slide. And as we mentioned earlier, the town of Dyer is going through a comprehensive planning process. We've looked at that process. We've interfaced with the consultants that are working on that plan and really, understand that that plan is kind of setting this community up for success by identifying areas that investment could occur in the future. Next slide. And some of those areas, you can see some images from the comprehensive plan here up on the screen, really focus in on opportunities on Main Street, opportunities along the rail, and where some properties could be unlocked in the future as infrastructure improvements, both rail and road infrastructure improvements, are made to allow for sites to develop in a way that is complementary to the community's land use goals and aspirations. And then over time, continuing that investment further south down Sheffield, where there are some commercial sites that could see some continued reinvestment, and then linking up with kind of the downtown area further south. Other planning we've looked at, we've looked at what NICTD is moving forward with for the station area site itself, looking at kind of a large amount of parking that they are planning, as this is kind of the end of the line of this phase of the train. And, understanding that there's going to be a lot of people coming to this area and parking to take the train up north to connect in with the South Shore line into Chicago. So looking at the opportunities around that as well as the constraints, and knowing that there really is going to be a hub of activity here in the future. So that gets us to kind of where we've kind of dug a bit deeper into existing conditions. And as Eric mentioned, we went through kind of a qualitative and quantitative analysis. We looked at other things like walkability. We looked at land use, property ownership, and really tried to understand what opportunities might exist there. What we've done then is really try to suss that out into kind of a graphical process that is rooted in our research and our analysis and our interactions with the communities as we work to arrive at this boundary. So that's what I'm going to walk you through now, is actually how we arrived at that boundary. But first, we'll talk just for a moment about context. I know you all are really familiar with this area, but the red line kind of 2/3 of the way up the screen is the corporate boundary between Munster and Dyer. And this is kind of an interesting station area. The station will exist on kind of both sides of that municipal lines. There's parking on both sides of it. The station platform itself will be up in Munster along the train line. But, there's a lot of opportunity in this area. There is some vacant ground in this area that could see some continued investment in the future. So there is a really good potential for economic development in this area. Next slide. And then zooming in on the station area itself, it is a vacant area today, and you can see some areas around it that could see continued single family residential as well as other uses in the future. So just to kind of provide context and kind of give you guys an idea, you'll see two different circles here. One is a 10-minute walk circle and one is a 20-minute walk circle. And that's, kind of as the crow flies. The idea, though, is that, as some of these areas within that walkable 20-minute area develop over time, you really are in an area where you could walk pretty easily if there was good pedestrian infrastructure to the station, get on the train, and be able to walk right from your home. Next slide. So that takes us to the boundary itself, and you'll see the boundary straddles both communities roughly, and we're going to refine this a little bit further, South of Main Street in Dyer, it's about 115 acres is what we're looking at, and then north is about 220 acres. So thinking about available land, and we'll kind of walk you through kind of how we arrived at that now. We'll kind of back into that process. And if you have questions as we're walking through this, please don't hesitate to indicate that in the question box. We'd be happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. So the first step we looked at here is, what are the places that people go to? Where are the anchors? It's things like the hospital, things like parks, churches. These are places that really have established the place that exists today around the station in these two areas. And we're trying to work from there, but not necessarily impact any of these areas in a negative way. We see them as an asset. Commercial areas, there could be an opportunity for some continued investment in some of the commercial areas indicated in pink on this map. And you can see them along Sheffield, along Columbia, and then along Maine. Residential areas, we understand from both communities that it's extremely important to protect the single family residential neighborhoods that are here today. And we have not looked to impact those in any way. We have looked at some vacant ground in some residential areas that could see some continued investment in accordance with, both of the respective communities' land use planning and zoning ordinances. So it would be the kind of development that the community would want to see in those areas. And then we've also looked at kind of vacant or publicly owned property. That's often a place where, as we call it, low-hanging fruit, where there could be an opportunity for investment, or there may be people already owning property who would like to invest in those properties in the future. As I mentioned previously in walkthrough, there's a lot of previous planning that's been done in these communities. It's recent and it's of really good quality. And so we've leaned on that. So you can see the areas in green are places where there have been plans done, or maybe there's development already occurring in the case of Centennial Village. So we've looked at that and tried to work around that, as well as position, those areas in some instances to be included within this district. And then there's some additional areas of interest that we've included in orange that could see, based on our analysis, a good degree of economic development in the future. So that has kind of led us to what we call the composite boundary. And the idea here is that, we're really trying to establish a boundary that is embracing both communities' goals, both from a land use and redevelopment perspective, and then also from an economic development perspective. Next slide. So that leads us to the draft boundary at 325 acres. And hopefully that was a good explanation of kind of how we arrived at that boundary. Next slide. And then we talked a little bit earlier about TIF districts, and you can kind of see along Main Street, these are actually two different TIF areas in both Munster and Dyer respectively. This is just a graphic illustration of those areas that are in TIFs today. And again, there would be an interplay between the TIF and the TDD in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric to talk about complementary community growth.
All right, thanks, Aaron, and thanks to all of you who are hanging on the line still. I appreciate your interest. As Aaron mentioned, we will have time for Q&A. So if you do have a question you would like answered, feel free to type that in the Q&A box, and we'll get to that here momentarily. But as Aaron went through the boundary, the draft boundary, he talked a lot about the different kind of adjacencies that we're looking to preserve and protect, and the kinds of things that could be possible. And those things really, as I mentioned before, want to work together with your community's visions. And so these are the kinds of things, as we've looked through your plans, these are the kinds of things in these pictures that you've said would be of interest as the community continues to grow in this area. This kind of development could be important in terms of providing new commercial spaces, new retail and restaurant spaces, and new housing as well. In this form, it would be more of a mixed use type of housing format, but also there would be the opportunity for new housing that really sort of fits the spectrum of housing choice, all the way from single family homes to apartment buildings and to condos and to townhomes, to duplexes, fourplexes. The span of housing choices here really could support your goals and be located in the right places per your zoning and ordinances and land use plans that you already have in place. So these visuals, we find it's sort of helpful to depict the kinds of things that we're talking about. We certainly don't have a place on the plan for these, but it would be based on your community's goals for where and how you would like your community continue to grow and develop over time. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, new development is certainly one of the primary goals for the Transit Development District, but that can take the shape of many different formats, including adaptive reuse, infill, redevelopment, and then, of course, preserving things that are really strong today and making them even stronger. Next slide, please. I've said this as well, but keep in mind, though it just appears as a line on the drawing, it's not just a boundary in this sense. It's really a new tool for your community leaders to be able to put your community on the growth path that you'd like to see, and to be able to use the revenue capture model to really invest in the types of infrastructure and community assets that you really would like to see and need in these areas. Next slide, please. And don't forget to please visit the project webpage. As I mentioned earlier, from that webpage, www.nwitdd.com, you'll be able to see this presentation. In fact, you'll be able to see presentations we made for other stations as well. But you'll be able to learn more. You'll be able to peruse this information at your own pace and be able to really study the information we've gone through and ask us more questions. Also, do check out, if you can, the galleries. Those are opportunities for you to learn more at those locations at both Munster and Dyer town halls. As I mentioned, we're going to continue to refine the boundaries that we've presented this evening, along with your community's leadership, taking into account anything that we've heard this evening. That'll set us up to conduct those RDA board public hearings in the near future, and then eventually move towards approval and review and approval by the State Budget Committee. Next slide, please. And with that, we certainly appreciate your participation this evening. It really makes this process much more meaningful. And we do have time remaining to address questions and answers that might have popped up. I don't know that we've received a lot thus far, but we do have a handful. And so with those coming up on the screen now, we'll attempt to kind of real time provide some answers. There's a question here, or maybe a comment about the commercial properties surrounding this owners are all included in the draft TDD boundary. However, ours was not. What is the process for requesting reconsideration? We certainly can reconsider the boundary, and that is really what this evening and the presentation is really meant to conjure up is feedback like that. So we'd be happy to have an offline conversation about that. Thank you for providing your information, your name, so we can contact you and follow up there. The next question here is, will the Cambridge Court condos on Fisher be negatively impacted by train noise or land use? Now, I'll speak to the land use side because the train noise is a NICTD topic, but on the land use side, we're really working directly with the town to promote the land use that has already been sort of decided in these areas. Again, our task here is really not to change that. Our task is to simply draw the boundary that'll allow this economic development tool to be used in the future by Munster and by Dyer. So to the degree that the community has already designated that land use would be retained. The next question here, has there been any thought about how the proximity of the Lansing Municipal Airport might affect development? I believe we've included portions. Aaron, if you wouldn't mind chiming in here, we have contemplated the potential for that site over time. We know that there's potential there. And so the boundary has included some portions of that, Aaron. And if you have anything else to add, feel free.
Yeah, so, we've looked at the airport, which is, of course, across the state line. And we actually, further north, when we were doing our analysis, there were a couple areas that had development restrictions due to FAA kind of height restrictions due to the airport. The areas that we're looking at do not necessarily have active height restrictions, and the zoning codes within both communities have taken that into account. So we felt pretty confident that there wouldn't be any negative impact there.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. The next question here is about schedule and how we'll be addressing the other communities. Of course, we've already held one meeting for the Ridge Road Station. This evening is obviously focused on the Main Street Station. We will be meeting tomorrow with Ogden Dunes, having the same presentation for Ogden Dunes tomorrow. We are scheduling out presentations to the other communities. We're hoping to wrap those up this winter. Of course, the holiday season always presents some challenges in terms of scheduling those things out, but we anticipate similar meetings like this occurring over the next month or two, and many of the communities that remain to be presented to. The next question here is really a question about Margot Lane. Will it remain open, be open or remain closed to the new parking lots? Again, more of a NICTD conversation on that front. I believe those are remaining closed. I can't speak 100% to that, but this plan really isn't proposing to change those types of things. We're really just drawing that boundary to capture the different kinds of economic development potential that can occur over time within those areas. Now, that particular question I know has been a topic several other times, and so I think that the towns will consider those sorts of things over time in terms of how infrastructure might change, but really tonight's efforts are really focused on creating the boundary itself. The next question here is, what about the potential positive impact of having some type of intermodal connection between the airport and the rail? It's a great question. There could be some possible new infrastructure related to things like streets and trails, maybe even multimodal transportation. Those sorts of things, again, kind of fall outside of what we're talking about this evening. But I think all those kinds of topics are great conversations for the communities to continue to have, particularly because as we think about the train and the access that it provides to Chicago, and quite frankly other communities, there will be sort of the interest in getting to stations, not just by car, but on foot and by bike and maybe even other modes of transportation. So I think those are really great conversations to have and to continue to build kind of a really great, robust network of options to get to destinations. The next question here is, which group will be tasked with working on any extension of Main Street into Illinois? Again, I think that's going to come out of local planning work for the most part. The opportunity here tonight is to draw the boundary, but I know that similar to the question about Margot Lane, the Main Street conversation has been ongoing. And I think the local communities have been discussing that for a number of years. I'm sure that'll continue to be occurring over time, but certainly not for this effort. This effort is, again, focused on creating that boundary so that we can promote the new economic development tools for communities, which could include new infrastructure like that, if that's deemed to be a priority. So that might be all we have currently for questions. We can certainly continue to hold the meeting open here for the next couple of minutes in case another question or two pops up. These are all really good questions. And one of the things that we tried to do at the start of the presentation is really outline, what this process is and what it isn't. But we even in our previous meeting for the Ridge Road Station, and I'm sure for subsequent meetings in other communities, we'll get questions about the kinds of infrastructure that you're interested in seeing or maybe not interested in seeing in communities. I'm sure those will be, active topics going forward for the communities to consider. So I'm glad people are thinking about that, because certainly these are the kinds of things that would be eligible for the kinds of investment that could be happening within these TDDs. And the schedule, I just wanted to revisit the schedule question, knowing that some of you may not necessarily be residents of Munster or Dyer. You may have a general interest. If you want to hear a very similar presentation but focused on Ogden Dunes, we have a presentation tomorrow night, same time, and you'll learn a lot about that area. And as we begin to develop dates for future meetings in other communities, we'll certainly make those available through press releases as well as on the website. So we do have a new question here, which is, what specific revenue requirements does Munster have that cannot be met by existing revenue mechanisms in TIF and that required the development of this new tool? I might actually turn that question over preliminarily here, or primarily over to policy analytics. Maybe Bill Sheldrake would maybe want to take that initially, and also maybe Dustin may want to weigh in on that as well.
Hi, this is Bill Sheldrake from Policy Analytics. I feel like Dustin might have a better answer on this than I do, but maybe the stranglehold on the obvious answer would be that probably two things. A transit development district captures not just property tax increment, but income tax increment as well. And so in that respect, it gives a little broader tool to a community in working with new development projects. The second thing I would say is that in some cases, a TDD could have a longer life than a TIF district, and so it may give the community, in working with the RDA, the ability to extend the development process and the incremental capture longer if a TIF district would be going out of existence because they have fixed lives. So I would just throw those two things out that could be possibilities for providing additional tools to a community, and in this case, Munster or Munster and Dyer. But Dustin, would you want to address that?
Yeah, sure, Bill. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. So the question is, what specific revenue requirements does Munster have that cannot be met by existing revenue mechanisms in TIF and that required the development of this new tool? Now, if I read that question, I think what the person is asking is, do we need this to pay existing obligations? No, we don't. We have an excellent track record of meeting all our debt service, so we have a phenomenal bond rating. And this also presumes that we created this, Munster, which we did not. This was a legislative act out of the Indiana General Assembly, House Bill 1144. So what specific requirements does Munster have right now that can't be met by the existing revenue mechanisms through TIF? What will happen, right, is development will happen, and then we will have an opportunity to meet if you're a Munster resident, your expectations about what that development area looks like, right? It will be, will it be landscaped appropriately? Will the streets be laid out in a rational way? Will it facilitate the kinds of multimodal transportation options that we've heard time and time again through our land use planning exercises and streetscape exercises? This tool will allow us to facilitate those things that the public wants to see that aren't necessarily developer driven. So there's nothing on our plate right now that we can't handle with the money and the revenue that we have. What this is a prospective tool for us to better meet the community's needs and desires in the future when that development occurs, based on the increment that that development produces.
Well said. Thanks, Bill and Dustin. So we've got a couple more questions here, which we might have already addressed, or maybe even Dustin just addressed to this first one. To what extent will you consider planning to make it easy and feasible to walk or bike, to bike or walk to the train station? I think moving forward, as the communities continue to plan out new pieces of infrastructure, I think these are the exact kind of things that they'll be considering to really leverage this new mode of transportation, the train, and its connectivity to other places. So I think this is something that would be on the radar, but not quite a part of this effort. The next
Eric,
question.
may I interject just a moment, because I want to address this person's concern, because the town's working on this right now. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. And as a cyclist myself, I want to share this good news. So the town submitted to NIRPC, our regional planning agency that is responsible for distributing federal funds for road improvement. They have gone through the process of ranking those applications. Munster, Dyer, Chevron, Highland are cooperating on an application that Munster is leading the way on redesigning Main Street, specifically to facilitate the inclusion of bike lanes and sidewalks and making it a complete street. This is a really exciting project. It's not going to be the 45ification of Main Street. That's not the feedback that we got from the community or council. It's going to be a very, very nice street that will have the opportunity for multi-modes of transportation. So I think that's really good news. And I think it's getting at the question you're asking. And to the extent that there's an increment produced that we can do additional things for that district within that district that addresses pedestrian connectivity. I know for a fact that there is a real issue between the west side of Calumet, those neighborhoods over there, and the east side of Calumet, where Centennial Park is. You know, the way this boundary is designed gives an opportunity to tie those two things together from a pedestrian and cyclist perspective. So that's an option. I'm not saying there's a plan that we can pull off the shelf and do that, but these are the tools that we will have in the future to take care of the desires that we have right now.
Great. And I think you hit two birds with one stone there, Dustin, because I'll jump down one more question, and then I'll come back to the consideration question here. But the question about Main Street and Dyer being able to move the traffic, I think you kind of outlined some thoughts on Main Street just now, and of course that street will reach the new parking lots west of the track where the NICTD parking lots will go. So the improvements will extend to that distance. But I think you gave a great summary of some of the other things that would happen along Main Street as well. Again, not part of this project, but running parallel.
Yeah.
For sure. The question we skipped over: what consideration has been made to the obvious changes in the business environments, working from home? The interests and needs may change completely. Certainly things are changing. To what extent those will be permanent, we don't know. What we do know is that the train will provide us a new sort of means of getting around to other locations. And certainly, as you saw earlier, this kind of investment will undoubtedly attract new investment. And so we want to be able to plan for that in the right way. We we can't predict how much or how quickly, and maybe not even what kind. But what we can do is create a boundary that will withstand these types of changes. Certainly, COVID has really created a different environment than we had a year ago. There will be other disruptions that occur over time that we won't be able to predict right now, but certainly creating the boundary gives the towns a lot of opportunity to really guide the growth that they would like to see, that they've been planning actually for quite a long time. And so to create this new tool to effectuate that development is really what this is about. And as circumstances change, I'm sure, the communities will adjust accordingly to really sustain the growth and the vitality that they enjoy today. The next question here, I certainly will ask Bill Sheldrake to weigh in on this one. This question is about, is any debt proposed to be issued by the TDD subject to the same constitutional limit of 2% of AV like municipalities?
Thanks, Eric. The TDD legislation allows the RDA to use the increment that comes from the district to pay debt service on bonds that would be issued by the RDA through the state, actually through the state in the Indiana Finance Authority, so that those bonds would not be on the community's balance sheet, if you will, would not be against the community's 2% debt limitation. So while we don't have any plans for bonds yet, but if there were bonds issued for some projects within the TDD, then those bonds would be issued by the RDA and would not count against the town's debt limitation.
Thanks, Bill. The next two questions are really more NICTD questions. We aren't really focused on the actual parking lot design or maintenance of the parking lots. Those are really more questions for NICTD in terms of how the management of the parking lots are structured, and sort of how the parking lots have been designed, and the number of cars that each parking lot will hold. Those are great questions. I think NICTD would be a better source of information. I wouldn't want to misspeak on their behalf for those questions, but I do encourage folks who do have questions for NICTD on things like this to reach out and try to seek those answers. Well, you've been a very active group and great questions. We can tell that you've been paying attention, and you've provided some challenging and thoughtful feedback here. I think we can hang along here for another minute or two. If another question pops up, we'll certainly take that. And if not, again, there are multiple ways you can continue to stay involved through the galleries, through polls that you can take when you visit the galleries, through the website, etc. So continue to consider what you've seen this evening, and if you know of folks who haven't been able to attend tonight, please spread the word on the website and how they can receive the same information and provide us with some feedback as we move forward into our fourth step of our process here. And so with that, seeing as how we don't have any questions popping in, I think we can go ahead and conclude this evening's presentation. Again, we appreciate everybody's participation tonight. There certainly is a lot of information to take in, so feel free to use all the tools we've talked about and gaining more information and learning on your own at your own pace. We look forward to continuing to receive your feedback. We'll post the questions and answers to the webpage here in the next several days so that you'll be able to see these answers and questions all in one spot. So with that, I'd like to just again conclude by saying thank you, and please keep in tune with changes and progress that we make. Sherry, did you want to say anything concluding?
I think you did a great job, Eric, but yes, I will thank you. Thank you all for your time and participation tonight. Of course, the RDA we want to continue to address your concerns to help you better understand, the coming economic development and social benefits, and to really keep relaying the message that a TDD complements the economic development and growth path of your community. And we want to hear from you. We appreciate all the feedback and questions that we received tonight, but we want to keep that going. So please visit our website, NWI-TDD, submit your questions and your comments. We are monitoring that multiple times throughout the day, so we should be able to respond to you quite quickly. And of course, there's informational material on there too for all the TDD locations, proposed locations. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Anderson and Mr. DiGilio if there are closing thoughts that they would like to add as well.
I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Dyer.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody. Just one bit, we talked about having the boards at Town Hall. Unfortunately, we've closed Town Hall because of the COVID situation, but we can make arrangements. I just use the website and you get the same benefit and stuff. So, but thanks everybody. There were some interesting questions. And if you have anything you want to talk about, just give me a call at the office. Thank you very much.
And to Tom's point, the boards, so the same boards that you would see at Munster or Dyer's town halls are also on the website, and the Mentimeter survey, so that's the survey that you could take with your smartphone, is also on the website, so nwitdd.com.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.